let's go ahead and get into this Jimmy Dore story. So Professor Wolf, speaking of Professor Wolf, he was actually on Jimmy Dore recently, and they were also talking about the Freedom Convoy. And Professor Wolf is talking about like having a worker movement and what that looks like. So let me share my screen because I want you to hear this conversation. Again, whether you're for the protest or not, I'm for, workers' rights. I'm for the people's rights. Like, we need to do something in this country. Like, I'm so fed up. I'm not getting any younger, and something needs to change. All right, so let me play this.
The knees right from underneath. What do you say to that? Of course, the unions in the United States that do exist seem to be 100% corrupted and on the side of the people they're supposed to be organizing against. They're on the side of management, it seems, most of the time. That's what it seems like to someone like me. They don't seem like they're really negotiating in the best interests of the workers all the time. Lots of times you hear workers, when they go on strike, they reject the offer made by their own union. So here, the Teamsters Union denounces the ongoing Freedom Convoy protest at the Canadian border that continues to hurt workers and negatively impact our economy. So what do you make of that when the Teamsters turn against workers who are actually doing the first time in my lifetime that workers en masse are making a big dent into the oligarchy, and then a union like the Teamsters seems to take the knees right from underneath? What do you say to that?
Well, I think the way to understand it is the unions in this country have been in decline for the last 50 years. It's a straight line down. Every year they have fewer members than the year before. It's long overdue for the unions to ask themselves the honest question, how much of that decline that we keep blaming on the bosses is really because we're not doing what we could have and should have done, what we once did back in the 30s when, for example, the Teamsters were organized and did shut things down and did close things inside the unions of America and Canada, including inside the Teamsters, about what you're pointing to.
Yeah, so I want to come in here for just a second and say something about the unions. There are some unions in this country that are good, strong unions. Not all of them are. And one thing that was made apparent when we did the General Strike Summit, some of the union leaders are very effective. They really want to get out there and fight. But then you have some union leaders that sometimes they'll organize these strikes with the union. But then if the company makes a deal with the union leader, then the union leader will take the deal and that's it. The strike's over. Whereas everyone in the union may not have agreed with that. And then sometimes you have some of these union leaders are making a lot more money than other people in the union. So that was one of the things that came up during the General Strike Summit, was that we had union leaders on, and we had people on that have experience working with them. And they said it can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing. It basically depends on the type of union that you end up with and the people that you're working with. So I agree with Professor Wolf here. I think that the unions could fight harder. Like, I don't see the unions doing like what they did back in the 30s, the way that they fought back and pushed FDR to do the New Deal. So that's something I want to remind people. It wasn't like FDR just woke up one day and said, all right, I want to give people, all of these benefits because times are hard. It was because the people pushed back, the people rose up. So that's something to keep in mind. They could be doing more. And another thing I want to remind everyone, not everyone has a union. I've never been a part of a union. I've worked in higher ed for over 10 years. I've worked in healthcare. I've never been a part of a union. And those are the workers that I also worry about, sometimes a little bit more than those a part of the union, because there's nobody representing us. When we were overworked and the low pay and the raises were cut at BU, there was nobody representing the salary employees, because salary employees at Boston University are not a part of the union. The hourly employees are. So this is just something to keep in mind. Like, if you're not a part of a union, who's representing you? No one.
And there's a big fight about it. Whoever's in the leadership now, yeah, they make statements like that, but make no mistake, they haven't been able to deliver to their members for so long that every day you're seeing the growing strength of the people who say, we've got to have a change, we've got to be more active. And I think those people are looking at the folks in the truck drivers in Canada, more or less the way you are, as a welcome change in going along and being agreeable and saying no. Again, I suspect they wish there were other issues than the ones they've chosen. But look, you can't always choose what the final straw that breaks the camel's back. I know truck drivers. They got a lot of, this is what comes out, but I think behind it, it's no exaggeration to say they've got a lot of needs that aren't being met, a lot of demands, and you're absolutely right. That's the key issue, shutting down any chance that what they're doing becomes an inspiration for other workers in this country and so on. And that's why the pressure is on for everybody that the business community can control to call them names, racist, Nazi, bad for workers, whatever they can think of to keep this, to keep the lid on this kind of thing.
Bingo. What he just said. This is incredibly important. I really wanted everyone to hear that message. Again, whether you support their protest or not, what you have to understand is that, number one, if you're going to do this type of thing, you need to have a list of demands. You really do. And I think back to when, you know, we were fighting for like the squad to like join, you know, be a part of, to go into DC and fight back. And I look back on it and I'm trying to remember, did we actually have a list of demands? So for those of you who still want to, you know, participate in the duopoly, I know some people don't, some people do. For those of you that do, I highly recommend you start asking, do you have a list of demands? Because I know we all wanted like Medicare for all, but did we demand it? Like, so I think that is incredibly important. They have that. They have a list of demands. Another thing that he said was he's talking about the smears, the way the truckers are being smeared. This is important for people to note. What they are doing right now is actually accomplishing something. What they are doing is actually disrupting the environment. So the protest that the truckers are doing right now is actually starting to work. And they don't seem to want to budge at all. The truckers don't want to budge. They're like, no, we'll continue doing what we're doing. So when you start to protest and it starts to work and it's actually disrupting what is going on in the environment right now, they're disrupting trade, right? Between them because they're on the border. So that is when they will come at you with smears. And I want to give you an example from history as well in reference to that. I don't know if they're right wing, if there's Nazis. I've heard so many different stories. I don't know. I'm not there. Hopefully I can get Max to come on to talk about that because he was on the ground. But you have to be careful when you hear these talking points from people with any type of direct action. I went through that with the marches for Medicare for all. They were heavily smeared. By the way, they were smeared by some people who call themselves leftists, by the way. So they were heavily smeared. People said that we were, it's the same thing. They said we were working with Nazis. That was not true because there were people that were a part of those marches that were not on the left. And I've said this before, if you really want to create change and make a movement in this country, you can't just do it with people on the left. The left is very small, very small. This is a conservative country. I live in a blue state and there's even parts of this state that are conservative. So you have to work with other people to create a larger movement, but they heavily smeared the marches for Medicare for all. People smeared Force the Vote. Any type of direct action, you're going to have those people come out. So my thing to you is when you hear those types of smears, before you believe it, again, I don't know if that's true or not, before you believe it, Look into it. Do a little bit of research. Try to talk to somebody who's there. Try to talk to somebody who's involved. Twitter is actually really great for this because there's a lot of us that have organized events on Twitter. So if you see those things going around, instead of spreading that message, try to find out if that's actually true first, because I'm telling you, every movement has infiltrators. The Black Panthers had infiltrators. Bernie Sanders' movement with his campaign had infiltrators. So you have to keep that in mind, you guys. Anything for us to think negatively about it. And a good example I wanted to point to from history is the civil rights movement. That also had infiltrators. Look at the things that they said about Dr. King. Look at the things that they said about Malcolm X. They smeared them too. And then when they realized that the smears weren't working, they killed them. So this is just really interesting. No, Young City, the left in this country is small. Like, I don't think people realize that. And by left, I'm not talking about liberals. Liberals are not the left. I want to be very clear. The left in this country is small. America is a conservative country. You can look this up for yourself, actually. You can look this up for yourself. And it's not, you're talking about like the right depends on gerrymandering. You're talking about people that are voting. The majority of Americans in this country don't vote. So you can't just think about the people who are voting. You have to think about the issues. You have to think about the policies. But I'm telling you, as someone who, like I said, I live in a blue state. I've lived in red states. I've had to work with people on the right. And I'm here to tell you, this country is not as left as people think. And having lived in other countries, I can tell you that as well. Let me go back into the video. Point of the day, guys, be very careful when you hear those types of messages. Every movement has infiltrators.
And I think as a leftist, it is a terrible mistake to have the focus of attention beyond this mandate question rather than the huge other issues that the truckers would be the first one to say to you are even more important to them than whether or not they get a shot in their arm.
And so do you have any predictions for this? I mean, this is the first I'm hearing of the truckers wanting to go from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. in the United States. Now, of course, my fingers are crossed that they'll do something like this, but they will add a few demands, at least one. I wish they would add at least one demand.
There's that word again, demands. Demands.
What that could be, it could be, I don't know, living wage, could be healthcare, it could something would be great. But do you have any predictions or any feelings about it? You say you know truckers.
Yep. I think that debate, I know that debate is going on inside the Teamsters Union, inside other unions, among truckers. The biggest one that I hear from them is that they have suffered, relative to other workers, a decline in their wages and their working conditions over the last 25 or 30 years. A number of them, come from families where the father or the grandfather was a trucker. They know the history of the industry. They know they've been getting the shaft as the bigger trucking companies have racked up huge profits. You know what they're bitter at now? They're bitter. They're saying, and they're right, and I say it as an economist, the companies that are jacking up prices, our inflation, to make more money, are using the truckers and blaming them. Oh, well, we're not raising prices to make more profits. Oh, no. We're just struggling to cope with the shortages in the supply chain.
Bingo. I want to remind everyone that prices were increasing before this protest started. I know this very well. The cost of groceries have greatly increased. I was saying this the other night. I used to pay like $189 per month. Yes, I know that's a exact number, but I I have to budget, so I know these numbers. $189 for a whole month of groceries, right? It's over $300 now. I'm buying the same food, going to the same grocery store. So that started before this protest. So again, whether you agree with what the truckers are doing or not, like, don't blame this whole inflation thing on them, because that was already starting. I noticed the difference in the prices. Again, I told you I don't like spending money. I've told you guys this before. So I know how much it costs for me to do groceries per month. I know how much it costs for me to put gas in my car per month. That also increased, by the way. So I know if I'm having to go back and get gas twice a week, and I usually didn't have to do that, something is not right. I noticed the prices have increased, and that happened before the truckers. So I'm glad that he mentioned that. And this is why it's important to listen to Professor Wolf. That's all I can say.
And then they can point the finger at the truckers for somehow being to blame for the fact that your loaf of bread or your dozen eggs cost you more money. I mean, it's not true. It's fake, but it is a sign. And I congratulate you on this, Jimmy. It's a sign of understanding that labor militancy in an economy like ours could change the whole direction of where this country is going, and with a lot more probability than electing Donald Trump or anybody else.
And what a huge mistake it is for people who consider themselves progressives or lefties or anti-Trumpers to just cede all those workers to the Republican Party, all those truckers, all those farmers, all that worker militancy against the oligarchy and establishment. They're just demonizing it, discrediting it, and pushing it into the right-wing political party. Well, they're both right-wing, into the Republican Party. But I see people who are committed lefties, who really consider themselves progressives and enemies of the establishment, demonizing these truckers. It's nuts. And you would agree that that's a big mistake for the left to do that, right?
Absolutely. It's a missed opportunity. It's even worse. If you call them those names, if you suggest that, you're putting into their heads the notion, gee, because I'm a trucker and I'm angry and I don't want the government and I don't want the big businesses to run everything, that makes me a right-winger. Why are we doing the work of the right wing in suggesting that? That doesn't make you a right-winger. That makes you a labor militant. Now, we can argue about what you should focus your anger on. For me, it's big business. That's the name of the game. That's where the buck starts and stops. But I can live with people who have different perspectives on that. But that's what the left should be doing, going there and saying, look, we are the social movement that you ought to ally with to make the kinds of changes we all need.
There he goes again. So it's true. You need as many people as possible. You need numbers. Like civil rights movement had numbers, mass movements. You need more people. And I'm going to tell you right now, based on what I've been seeing on Twitter, that's been happening with the left over the past year, we can't even do a movement with the left. The left is divided. You got some people on this side. Some people are divided over podcasters. Some people are divided over the mandates. Some people are divided over this trucker situation. I've seen actual like friendships just torn apart over this. So people talking about we need to just do the movement with people on the left and we don't need to talk to people on the right. The left isn't even together. We're not one group. We're split. And part of the reason, like, I still bring it back to the class issue. You guys know I talk about that a lot. Part of it has to do with the class divide. Again, people who are comfortable, most of the time, not everyone, most of the time, you don't see them trying to organize no protests. You don't see them trying to get out in the streets. There are some of the ones like Hassan Piker that will tell you mutual aid is a waste of time. Those people are comfortable. Those people are rich. They don't need it. And so this is why I say the working class people got to rise up. And if you're only going to try to get working class people on the left, that's not enough people. You're going to have to go across the aisle. Now, I said this before. When Democrats and Republicans in DC do this, they call it bipartisanship. But when those of us who are not politicians, when we try to do it, we're smeared, we're called right wingers, or we're called a red-brown alliance. What's the difference? Why is it okay when politicians do it, but it's not okay when those of us who are not politicians do it? They don't want us to come together on class. They don't. They have to keep us divided by left and right. And as long as we stay focused on that, a lot of us won't even see that some of these policy issues we may actually agree with, but we can't get to that point and we can't have that conversation if you're quick to just dismiss someone because they're not a part of the same party affiliation as you. At the end of the day, both of those parties support Wall Street, and that is it. They do not support the American people. And the sooner we understand that and we come together on the class issue, then we can talk about having an actual rise up moment. But we're not there yet. People are too angry over podcasters.
And it's amazing that we're not seeing that happen. We're not, when in fact, even unions in America are demonizing those workers. I don't see the DSA. I don't see the Democratic Party. I don't see anybody standing up to try to absorb those protesting workers into their political movement. All they know how to do is demonize and push because they're all part of the establishment. Even if you think the DSA at the top is not part of the establishment, you're wrong, because this is proving it. Just like Force the Vote proved it, just like everything they do proves it. They won't do a fucking thing to push back against the people they helped get elected. And now where are they on this? You tell me where they are. I haven't heard a goddamn thing from them. So so I predict, though, the left in America will make that mistake. And they will push those people into the Republican Party and make them think they're right wingers instead of make them think that they're just workers who have an interest in lefty politics. So I have one more.
Well,
go ahead.
Just one more footnote. You know, for many, many years, the Teamsters Union was independent from the AFL-CIO. And for most of that time, they fought each other because the Teamsters regularly endorsed Republicans for president in the United States, whereas the AFL-CIO went for the Democrats. So there's a certain sad continuity in seeing the Teamsters here playing this kind of a role with the truckers in Canada.
So imagine if there was a party in the United States that actually did represent workers, that everybody would know that the Teamsters were doing nefarious shit if they didn't endorse them or go with them. Imagine if there actually was a party that represented, a major party that represented workers. They're trying to do one. They're trying to start one called the People's Party. My fingers crossed that they get it going. But there's one more thing I wanted to ask you about and get your perspective on this. Now, every establishment news media, when they cover the truckers in Canada, they do it in a negative way, call them Nazis, call them white supremacists, call them right wingers, call them funded by billionaire, all that stuff, right? So this guy had to go on Tucker Carlson because Tucker Carlson, ironically, or I don't know, is on Fox News, is the one who's given the workers an actual fair coverage.
And this is why sometimes you'll see people on the left go on to some of these conservative shows to get their point across, because CNN and MSNBC, they're not going to bring people on to say positive things about the truckers. They don't want to hear that. So it doesn't go with their narrative. It doesn't go with the narrative of the fact that, oh, they're all right wing. Like, it doesn't fit that. So they're not going to bring those people on. But then they'll go on to Fox News, and Fox News has its issues too, but they'll go on to Fox News, and then people will criticize that person for going on to Fox News because it was a conservative channel. But I'm like, but if that's the only outlet that would let them come on and tell their story, how are you supposed to get the story out?
So again, people like to hate on Tucker Carlson, and it's easy because he has some odious views on immigration, but he's also the only one who ever tells the truth about war, peace, imperialism, and now he's telling the truth about this. So I think he's doing actually a better
promises of sunny ways into dark authoritarian oppression and control.
Yes.
We want two things. We want to get rid of the vaccine mandates and the passports. And the passports that's a really concerning one. Yesterday, it was my first time ever crossing the border in my truck with my digital passport. And I held my phone up to the border agent to give him the QR code. You know what he said to me? "Oh, it's okay, I don't need it." So what do you mean you don't need it? So, "Oh, your phone already popped up on my screen and is correlated with your passport." Can you think of that? Can you believe that? So they know everybody who's coming up to the border before they're there, and they're tracking them. Now, maybe it's outlandish, but what's to prevent the government from introducing that across Canada and not limiting it to just borders? And you guys are getting it as well, and you can thank us for it, because apparently, according to our sources within the media and within government, we have some close ties. Apparently, the Trudeau government, the Biden administration had no interest in it, but the Trudeau government lobbied and requested the Biden administration to introduce this. We don't know why. We don't know the terms of the deal. Are they going to be trading intelligence back and forth between Canada and the US tracking cell phones? Of course, we have no idea. But this is where we're going if this does not stop. That's why this is the line. This is where it ends.
Yeah, I just want to say that's scary. Javi agrees. Yeah, that is really creepy. That is really creepy. I know people have different opinions about this, but I'm sorry that this is looking a little too Black Mirror episode to me. Like that's creepy. I'm going to play what Jimmy says, and then I'm going to go into the comments.
So I would just like to get your reaction to that.
Two things. Number one, I think it's a wonderful illustration of that remark that you quoted before, that there are other issues. I noticed that he says it's not so much the vaccine. That's the giveaway. It's the passport, because the passport slows you down when you cross the border. Time is crucial for every truck driver, how fast they can go from start point to end point so they can make the return trip. That's what shapes their income. They don't want a long delay at the border. There's no point in it. The passports are all about the paperwork and the other stuff that is going on here. So you see already your point, Jimmy. They're beginning to say, we're here. We got a number of things that we have going. That's number one. Number two, I agree, of course, on the surveillance point. It is an awful reality. But I want to say something, if you don't mind, about old Tucker Carlson.
Okay.
The history of Hitler, of Mussolini, is there's always a split on the right wing between those who just want to do the business of big business, the conservatives, the ones who think that the market is some genius institution and we should all bow down to it like some graven image. And those who know that if you only express the views of the employers, you're expressing the views of 1% of the people and you've lost everybody else. And they're not that stupid. So they've always had on the right wing, whether you call them fascists or not, those who want to appeal to the working class, who know that if they don't, they will be brushed aside. Hitler called his party the National Socialist Party. That was the point, to suggest to the German working class, which was overwhelmingly socialist in the 1930s when he got the power, that he was somehow their friend. Tucker Carlson wants to be somehow the friend of working people because somewhere he grasps that if you don't, you're just the mouthpiece of the Fox News people and who they congregate with. You won't go very far.
I didn't mean to cut him off like that, but very interesting. Very interesting. Professor Richard Wolff actually has a channel on YouTube, Democracy at Work, I think is the name of it. You should definitely check it out. If you have not seen some of his work, you should check it out. But this is what I was telling you guys, though. We have to find a way to come together. And as workers, those of us out there, like, it's our labor. So if anything, we need to come together on the labor issue. You know, We've been exploited by these companies for years. Meanwhile, the CEOs, their wealth doubled during the pandemic. Mine didn't. I don't know about you, but mine didn't. Did yours? So there's a problem here with this system. There's a problem here. And a lot of people don't want to talk about capitalism because at the end of the day, they want to be capitalists. That's their choice. But I don't see capitalism solving the poverty issue. I don't see capitalism working at all in this country. I just see constantly people at the bottom being exploited, being overworked, being used, abused, mistreated, and the people who have the money, who have the economic means, who have the resources, they're the ones at the end of the day, no matter what we go through, they will usually be fine. When we go through a pandemic, they will usually be fine. They will have the money and the resources that they need to get through the pandemic. Those of us at the bottom will not.